My name is Abdul Qadir. I'm 48 years old. I've spent most of my life working as a commercial truck driver. Long highways, empty roads, sleepless nights. After 25 years behind the wheel, very little could surprise me. Or at least, that's what I believed before I accepted one delivery into Grey Ridge National Forest. The job looked simple. Deliver electrical equipment to a remote fire lookout station. Unload it. Get paid. Drive home. The dispatcher warned me that the road wasn't used very often. That didn't bother me. I've driven roads that barely deserve to be called roads. Around 4 in the afternoon, my GPS lost signal. The forest swallowed every trace of civilization. No phone service. No passing vehicles. Nothing. Only miles of pine trees stretching in every direction. About an hour later, I reached an old checkpoint. A rusted gate blocked the road. An elderly ranger stepped out of a small cabin. He checked my paperwork without saying much. Then he looked directly into my eyes. "If you're still on this road after sunset." He paused. "Don't stop for anyone." I laughed. "You expecting hitchhikers out here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the gate. As I drove away, I looked in the side mirror. The ranger was still standing there, watching my truck disappear into the forest. The road became narrower with every mile. Branches scraped against both sides of the trailer. By the time darkness arrived, I was still 20 miles away from a lookout station. I cursed under my breath. I hated driving unfamiliar mountain roads at night. A thick fog rolled across the pavement. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. I slowed to 20 miles an hour. Then I saw someone. A woman. Standing in the middle of the road. She wore an old grey raincoat. Her head was lowered. She wasn't moving. I hit the brakes. The truck stopped less than 10 feet away. I rolled down the window. Are you all right?" No response. She remained perfectly still. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. Then I remembered the ranger's warning. Don't stop for anyone. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I shifted into first gear. Carefully drove around her. As the truck passed, she never looked up. I checked the mirror. She was gone. Not walking away. Not standing behind me. Gone. The fog swallowed everything. My heartbeat refused to slow down. 10 minutes later, the CB radio crackled. Static. Then a voice. "Abdul." I froze. No one on that route knew my name. The radio crackled again. "Don't look behind you." I grabbed the microphone. "Who's there?" Only static answered. Then, very softly, the same voice whispered, "She's inside the trailer." Every hair on my arm stood up. Impossible. The trailer had been sealed before I left the warehouse. I pulled onto a small gravel turnout. Stepped out with my flashlight. The night felt unnaturally cold. I walked to the rear doors. The security seal was still intact. Untouched. No signs of forced entry. I cut the seal anyway. Unlocked the trailer. Slowly pulled the doors open. Every wooden crate remained exactly where it should have been. Nothing had moved. I exhaled in relief. Then my flashlight landed on the floor. Wet footprints. Bare human footprints. They began at the front wall of the trailer, continued between the crates, and ended directly behind me. I spun around. No one. Only darkness. Only fog. Only silence. The next morning, I finally reached the fire lookout station. The cabin looked abandoned. Paint peeling from every wall. Broken windows covered with wooden boards. Yet smoke drifted lazily from a chimney. Someone was inside. An old caretaker opened the door before I knocked. He looked exhausted, as though he hadn't slept in weeks. You drove here last night? Yes. His face immediately changed. You shouldn't have. I told him about the woman, the radio, the footprints. He didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, he quietly asked one question. Did the voice tell you not to look behind you? I nodded. He closed his eyes. Then you're lucky. What do you mean? He walked to a shelf and removed an old photograph. It showed 6 truck drivers standing beside identical delivery trucks. 5 of them were smiling. The 6th man's face had been scratched away. I looked closer. The date beneath the picture read, October 14th, 1998. Nearly 30 years ago. Who are they? The caretaker pointed toward the scratched face. He ignored the warning. I frowned. What warning? He looked behind him. Silence filled the cabin. Then the caretaker slowly turned the photograph over. Written on the back was a list of names. 5 had black lines drawn through them. Only 1 remained untouched. The final name was mine. Abdul Qadir, and beneath it, written in fresh black ink. My name is Abdul Qadir. I'm 51 years old. For nearly 30 years, I worked as an electrical engineer. Most of my life was spent solving problems that other people couldn't understand. Electricity follows rules. Machines follow rules. Even disasters usually have an explanation. What happened to me 3 years ago? Didn't. I've never told this story publicly. Not because I'm afraid people will laugh. Because I'm afraid someone else will recognize it. It happened during a solo camping trip in the northern mountains. The place wasn't famous. In fact, it barely existed online. I found it through an old forestry map while planning a weekend hike. Only one narrow dirt road led into the valley. After that, everything had to be done on foot. The trail was beautiful. Towering pine trees. Crystal clear streams. Fresh mountain air. For the first 5 hours, I didn't see another person. That was exactly what I wanted. Around 4 in the afternoon, I reached an abandoned fire lookout tower. The wooden structure leaned slightly against the mountain. Half the windows were broken. The stairs looked unsafe. I decided to camp nearby. While setting up my tent, I noticed something strange. Someone had recently swept the ground around the tower. There wasn't a single fallen leaf within 20 feet of the entrance. The surrounding forest was covered in leaves. Only that small area had been cleaned. I assumed a ranger still visited occasionally. By sunset, I had finished dinner. The temperature dropped quickly. A thick fog slowly rolled between the trees. The entire forest disappeared behind a wall of white. At exactly 8:41 p.m., I heard a bell. One slow ring. Then another. It sounded distant, like an old church bell carried by the wind. I checked my map. There wasn't a town within 30 miles. The ringing continued every few minutes. Always the same rhythm. One bell. Silence. Another bell. Then nothing. Around midnight, I woke to a strange sound. Someone was climbing the fire tower. The old wooden stairs groaned beneath heavy footsteps. Step. 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 Slow. Deliberate. The sound continued until whoever it was reached the top platform. Then, silence. I looked toward the tower. No flashlight. No lantern. No movement. Only darkness. I convinced myself it was an animal. Maybe a bear. Maybe loose boards shifting in a cold. Then something happened that made every logical explanation disappear. A light suddenly appeared inside the lookout room. A soft yellow light. Like an old oil lamp. Someone was inside. I grabbed my flashlight. Walked halfway toward the tower. Hello. No answer. The light remained perfectly still. I called again. Nothing. As I stepped closer, the light disappeared. Not faded. Not switched off. Gone. I reached the bottom of the stairs. Fresh footprints covered the dust. Bare human footprints. They climbed the stairs. None came back down. I stood there staring for nearly a minute. Then I slowly climbed after them. Every step creaked beneath my weight. The higher I climbed, the colder the air became. When I reached the top, the room was empty. Completely empty. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. Dust covered every corner. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. No lamp. No person. No place for anyone to hide. Only one object looked untouched. An old guest register resting on the observation desk. Curious, I opened it. The first pages dated back to the early 1980s. Names. Dates. Comments from hikers. Then, the entries suddenly stopped. Nearly 20 blank pages followed. The final page contained only one signature. Abdul Qadir. Today's date. My handwriting. My signature. Exactly the way I write it. My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't been inside the tower before. I had never touched that book. Yet somehow, my name was already there. Beneath the signature was a message. I knew you would come. I slammed the book shut. Ran downstairs. Packed my equipment as fast as I could. I didn't care that it was after midnight. I wanted to leave. Immediately. The trail back should have taken less than 3 hours. Instead, after walking for nearly 2 hours, I found myself standing in front of the same fire tower. I stared at it in disbelief. Impossible. I checked my compass. Still pointing north. I chose another direction. Walked again. 45 minutes later, the tower appeared once more. The same broken windows. The same leaning stairs. The same fog. No matter which direction I walked, I always returned to the tower. Then I heard the bell again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from somewhere in the forest. It was coming from the top of the tower. Slowly, A figure stepped into the observation window. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching me. The fog hid every detail except its outline. I raised my flashlight. The beam reached the window. The figure became clear. It was me, wearing the same jacket, the same backpack, even holding the same flashlight. My double slowly lifted one hand. It smiled. Then it pointed toward the forest behind me. I turned instinctively. Nothing. When I looked back, the window was empty. The light was gone. The tower stood silent once again. I don't remember how I escaped that mountain. The next thing I remember was waking inside a small ranger station at sunrise. A rescue team had found me unconscious beside the trail. They said I was nearly 12 miles away from the fire tower. I asked them about the guest register. None of them knew what I was talking about. They exchanged confused looks. One ranger quietly told me something I'll never forget. There hasn't been a fire lookout tower in that valley since 1996. I argued with him. I described every detail. The broken stairs, the observation room, the register, the bell. He opened an old archive photograph. The tower had burned to the ground almost 30 years earlier. Nothing remained except the concrete foundation. Last month, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Someone had taken it from inside the lookout tower. Standing below, looking directly at the camera, was me. The date printed on the back read, 3 days from today. My name is Abdul Qadir. I'm 52 years old. For nearly 3 decades, I worked as an electrical engineer. I've spent my entire life believing that every mystery eventually has an explanation. That's the difference between fear and engineering. Fear imagines. Engineering proves. 3 years ago, something happened that destroyed that belief forever. I've never returned to the mountains since. I don't even look at satellite maps anymore, because every time I do, I remember the cabin. It started with an old newspaper article. A hiker had vanished inside a remote forest reserve. No body, no equipment, no signs of violence. Only his backpack was found, completely dry, standing upright in the middle of a clearing after 3 days of heavy rain. Everyone assumed he had fallen into a ravine. The case was closed. For some reason, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe retirement had left me with too much free time. Either way, I decided to visit the area myself. I wasn't looking for ghosts. I just wanted to see the place. The ranger station sat at the edge of the forest. A young ranger handed me a permit. As I signed my name, an older ranger walked over. He stared at my permit for several seconds. Then he quietly asked, "First time here?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "If you find a wooden cabin with blue shutters." He stopped speaking. "Walk away." I laughed. "There isn't one on the map." "I know." His voice was completely serious. "If you see it anyway." He looked directly into my eyes. "Don't go inside." I promised him I wouldn't. At the time, I thought he was joking. The trail followed a narrow river through dense forest. Everything felt peaceful. Birds filled the trees. Sunlight broke through the branches. The air smelled of pine and wet soil. By late afternoon, I reached a small waterfall. It looked exactly like the photographs I'd seen online. I stopped to eat. While drinking coffee, I noticed something unusual. Someone had stacked dozens of flat stones beside the river, perfectly balanced. Each pile stood nearly 4 feet high. Not one had fallen. There were too many to count. Whoever built them must have spent days there. Yet, there wasn't a single footprint anywhere nearby. I continued walking. Around sunset, fog began rising from the valley. Visibility dropped quickly. The trail became difficult to follow. That's when I saw it. A wooden cabin. Blue shutters. Exactly as the ranger had described. It stood alone among the trees. Warm yellow light glowed behind the curtains. Smoke drifted lazily from a chimney. Someone was clearly living there. I remembered the warning. Walk away. Instead, curiosity pulled me closer. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. The door slowly creaked open by itself. Inside, everything looked normal. A fireplace burned quietly. An old wooden table sat in the center of the room. Fresh bread rested beside 2 steaming cups of tea, as if someone had expected company. Hello. Silence. The cabin felt strangely warm. Almost too warm. Then I noticed the photographs hanging on one wall. Dozens of framed pictures. Every single one showed hikers. Different years. Different faces. Different clothing. Some photographs looked decades old. Others looked recent. All of them had something in common. Every person was smiling directly at the camera, standing in front of the same cabin. Then I froze. Near the end of the wall, I saw myself. The photograph showed me standing outside the cabin, wearing the same clothes I had on that day, smiling. The date printed beneath it. Tomorrow. My hands started shaking. I stepped backward. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Someone was walking across the second floor. Slowly. One step. Then another. The footsteps stopped directly above me. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Then, a voice. You're early. It sounded exactly like mine. I ran outside without looking back. The forest had changed. The trail was gone. The trees no longer looked familiar. Every direction looked identical. Dark. Silent. Endless. I walked for nearly 2 hours. Then my flashlight illuminated the cabin again. I had somehow returned to the same place. This time, the front door was closed. Someone stood behind the upstairs window, watching me. The figure raised one hand, slowly waved. I turned away and ran. Branches whipped against my face. My lungs burned. I didn't stop until I reached the river. Relief washed over me. Finally, a landmark. Then I noticed something floating downstream. My backpack. The same backpack I was still wearing. I looked down. Mine was still on my shoulders. The second backpack drifted past me. Seconds later, another one appeared. Then another. Dozens of identical backpacks floated silently down the river. Each carried the same blue sleeping bag tied to the top. exactly like mine. I followed the river until sunrise. Eventually, I found the main trail. 2 park rangers were searching for me. They said I'd been missing for almost 48 hours. I insisted it had only been one night. Neither of them believed me. Before leaving, I asked about the blue cabin. Both men became unusually quiet. The older ranger finally sighed. It isn't always there. What do you mean? He looked toward the forest. People only find it once. And the photographs? He slowly nodded. We've heard that part before. I asked if anyone had ever gone back. His answer still haunts me. They all tried. What happened? They could never find the cabin again. I drove home that afternoon. Life slowly returned to normal. Or at least, I pretended it had. 6 months later, I was organizing old camping equipment in my garage. Inside my backpack, I found something I had never seen before. A framed photograph. It showed the inside of the blue cabin. Standing beside the fireplace was me, holding a camera, smiling. Behind me, at the top of the staircase, someone else was smiling too. Someone with my face. Someone who hadn't been there when I took the picture. I turned the frame over. Written neatly across the back were 6 words. Next time, don't leave so quickly.